The very first one for 2026. I know you missed us because you've been saying so, but we are here to have a conversation about the state of education in the country. And of course, you see some of that research that is showing the parents are saying the quality of education has not necessarily improved. But let's start by talking about what just happened early in the year. Early in the year, it's possible because you're coming to the end of January. And the president has told parents that they must take their children to schools. I want us to listen to what exactly that was and the reactions that have been coming from that side.
Wawe na school fees, wasiwe na school fees. Wawe na uniform, wasiwe na uniform. Waende shuleni tomorrow morning.
So that was the president, and shortly after that we heard from, I think it was a day or so, the deputy president, Professor Kithure Kindiki, spoke, as well as CS Ogamba. Let's listen to them.
Uniform waende shuleni. Wale hawana uniform waende shuleni. Wale wako na school fees waende shuleni. Wale hawana school fees waende shuleni. Hiyo mambo ingine yote tutazungumza watoto wetu wakisoma.
Tumesema through the directive of His Excellency the President, kwamba watoto wote wale wanatoka grade 9 kwenda grade 10 waingie shule, hata kama wana uniform, hata kama wana school fees. Sisi tutapanga hiyo maneno. Mwalimu yeyote mwenye atarudisha mtoto nyumbani, huyu mtoto akifika nyumbani, mwalimu naye atoka aende nyumbani. Hatuwezi kubali. By Friday last week, tulikuwa tuko katika 94%. Wale watoto ambao wako nje walikuwa wako karibu 70,000 only.
Jebonyo, have the first bite because there are enough threats and promises at the same time.
Thank you. I think my verdict on the state of the education in this country was released yesterday. The National Assembly, especially this one, has been short of expectations for many Kenyans. And for them to indict you on the basis of incompetence, then I don't know what more sign somebody needs to read the mood of the country about the education sector. It is troubling some that the CS continues to issue threats to teachers while he acknowledges that he doesn't know the cost of keeping a child in school. So what exactly does he expect the teachers and the heads of these institutions to do when they receive these students as instructed by the president? What we are seeing in the Ministry of Education is a problem. Actually, it's a crisis of monumental proportions. And the faster CS Ogamba gets down to work to provide solutions, the better for this nation. Because otherwise, as it is, we are ruining lives, we are ruining opportunities, and we are shaking the foundation upon which this nation is expected to be built on. It is important to note that some of the things that we are seeing manifesting themselves now with the admission of grade 10, especially when you look at levies that are not sanctioned by the ministry, right, is as a result of the ministry not doing what is necessary as in terms of the checks and balances to ensure that schools are run according to what is expected in the Basic Education Act. So head teachers, principals, and whatnot have been running around, putting levies that are not sanctioned and getting scot-free with it. So it has been an open market for them. And therefore, when the CS comes years later to try and pretend to issue instructions to these institutions to do things that is right, then it can't just happen. There are numerous reports by a number of education lobby groups that are challenging the CS to act on these illegal levies. They've never acted.
Right.
There are court cases. They've never acted on them. So for me, it is a mess. It is a crisis, and the faster they get down to work to seek solutions, the better for this nation.
Inas, so teachers are supposed to be admitting learners to teach them, to train them. But then there's a threat hanging on your neck that if you don't admit them, regardless of whether they are you are well facilitated to have them in school, you'll be fired. How do we proceed?
It's really unfortunate to see the government leadership taking an us versus them approach to this. And I'm wondering who is on the opposite side of this apparent shouting match. You look at the president's tone, look at the deputy president's tone, and that of the CS education, and you wonder, who are they shouting at? Who stood in the way of that argument that children should go to school? Who has a contrary opinion? I think every person wants as many of our children and citizens of this country to be educated. There's nobody opposing that, so don't shout. Just say it and say how. Because at the end of this, the burden goes to head teachers. First of all, let me say these are populist pronouncements, but they're just meant to excite the public and also score what in street lingo we now call bonga points. You had a bit of the crowd cheering. But when children report to school, in those numbers that they are, and in the state they are in, whether you without or with school fees, with or without uniforms, there is somebody who has to deal with that.
Right.
And that is the school. The burden is on these head teachers. Now imagine you're throwing that burden to them and then talking down on them. It's really, really unfortunate, especially the pronouncements by the CS Ogamba saying that the teachers can be fired. For doing what? Schools are not private spaces. These public servants doing one of the most thankless jobs that you can have in a country, especially Kenya. They don't run those institutions as personal spaces. So they earn or lose nothing by what is being suggested here. They don't. I don't think there's any head teacher who just says, no, I don't want to have children in this school because I want to use the class to keep my cows and chicken. That's not what head teachers do. So I think the way head teachers have been treated in this particular transition has been deplorable, and I think they are owed gratitude, and they also owed an apology by the ministry officials. You don't lecture them that way, especially when you are throwing challenges, which, by the way, if given an opportunity yourself, you can't do much. Because I want to imagine if CS is given, take one of the schools and admit as you wish. Delayed capitation, you feed them with what? They are not paid, they don't have school fees. How do you get supplies for the school? I think, and this is my last point, Sam, we need a more thoughtful approach to some of the institutions and some of the roles that we have in this country, particularly education.
Right. It's
a space of strict competence. There's no guesswork there. And the earliest the politicians also understood that, the better. Because those populist statements they make out there must then be converted to some action. And they can only be done if it's actually practical.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on to this idea of having an unfair advantage. So you have these powerful individuals who are making these threats, ironically, on a political stump. Head teachers do not have a similar platform. So how is this dialogue supposed to happen or take place? So when, and by the way, the cabinet secretary wasn't even speaking at an education function. It was over the weekend at what was a political fundraiser. And then he makes this threat. So how are the head teachers meant to respond? Do they also take up a political posture and then do that? It's an unfair conversation. What I do not understand is why ministry officials and head teachers can't sit down and have a conversation. Why aren't you admitting the number of students who want you to admit? These are the challenges that we face. Okay, with the amount of money we've given you up until this point, how much can you handle? This is what we can handle. This is what we cannot. Agree to disagree. You know, government can say, but we've given you enough money up until this point, you can take in 96% of the students, as they say, and we will sort out the rest later. But this kind of conversation is interesting. But it's also a dishonest conversation, even when they say, hiyo mambo ingine tutasolve baadaye, when they know what the real issue is. And let's talk about those real issues. Funding. That capitation that is supposed to be released, it's 50%, 20%, and 10%. 50% in the first term, and then on with the remaining 10% by the end of the year, consistently is late. Consistently. Including in, I believe it's the current financial year, the same CS was before a parliamentary committee that was expressing concern over the underfunding of schools. That was in term 1 of 2025. It was the previous financial year. Schools had only received 14 billion out of an expected 28. And these are the cash flow challenges that the head teachers are facing. And remember, this capitation is what is used for tuition, right? Now, the CS himself acknowledges a funding gap. He says, well, the ministry had disbursed 28.8 billion in 2 tranches. That was in January and March last year. There was still 7.5 billion shillings short. And then he comes up and says something particularly interesting for me, that, you know, we have never really done actuarial, you know, studies and analysis to understand what it takes to educate a child from ECD all the way to... Okay, sir, this capitation of 22,000 shillings, 244 for secondary school learners, how is that figure arrived at? How do we arrive at the figure of 1,420 shillings for each primary school learner, 15,043 for a junior school learner? And by the way, all of this information is based on enrollment data in NEMIS, which is the National Education Management Information Systems, which is based on the numbers of students. This thing, by the way, was launched back in 2017 when we were told this was going to be the mother of all databases. Each student was to get what they called a UPI, a unique portal number that tracks your progress and has all the details of that. They have consistently upgraded this system in 2022, and again now when we are with a multi-governmental task force to upgrade it to what we call chemists. So the idea is that this is scientifically based on numbers. These are the numbers of learners we have. This is the education system. Therefore, this is the money.
Right.
I think we should be concerned about that. And this is the problem. This is the issue. And it is the funding of education. And I think that's where the problem is. So it was rather interesting also to hear him say that and hear him admit before that we've got funding gaps, and then telling them to do that with whose money?
And it's fascinating that all this is happening at a time that the country is spending 706 billion shillings on education sector. So again, like the MPs were asking, so you arrive at a budget of 706 billion shillings based on what? And of course, there has been so many conversations going on, including the cabinet secretary issuing threats to schools to stop selling uniforms at particular shops. I don't know if you can listen to that as we exit from the conversation on what exactly he thinks should be done.
Principals are flouting the regulations that have been put down that you must allow the parents to source, for example, uniforms from the free market, not to direct them to specific shops or to specific people from where they are supposed to buy those uniforms. That is not a policy of government, and we've said, and we've been saying this throughout, that in situations where you find this being done as a parent, please report that to our field officers so that we can take action.
As a ministry, we are still working on a policy, and that needs to be actually in the law, that the school uniforms are bought from wherever the parents want to buy them, not from indicated or specific places directed by the principals.
All right, that's the Cabinet Secretary for Education, Julius Migos Ogamba. Of course, like I said, many conversations going on there, but clearly you can see there's a problem in the education sector. Who will resolve it? We'll later see, knowing too well that teachers have work to do in the institutions. No money there has been seen. At the same time, how are teachers supposed to take directives coming from the podium of microphones by political leaders while they usually rely on circulars, directions from either the ministry or directions from the Teacher Service Commission? How are they supposed to localize a soundbite in a meeting, in the staff room, or as they lead the assembly of the institution? Let's take a short break. When we come back, all right, we take another story which is on Haiti before we take that break, which is